setting expectations. So Putin is talking to Trump. He's trying to do it in a collegial way. He's trying to maintain good relations because he wants to have, he understands that the world is going to continue to exist after this war is over, and he's going to have relations with the United States one way or the other, and he wants it to be at least useful and non-kinetic, fighting back and forth. He doesn't want that to be on the possibility, so he's working toward that end. But that doesn't mean that Putin is going to get into a situation to where he's going to start giving things away. They have been incredibly significant, incredibly consistent from the beginning of where their red lines are, where they're no kidding, we will not negotiate beyond here. And that you can really go all the way back to Istanbul in 2022. But this right here is kind of what has formed the foundation of the current situation of June 14th of 2024.
The essence of our proposal is not some kind of temporary truce or suspension of fire, as, for example, the West wants. This is not about freezing the conflict, but about its final completion. And I will say again, as soon as Kiev agrees to a similar course of events proposed today, agrees to the complete withdrawal of its troops from the DPR and LPR in the Zaporozhye and Kherson regions, and really begins this process, we are ready to begin negotiations without delaying them. I repeat, this is our principled position. Neutral, non-aligned, nuclear-free status of Ukraine, its demilitarization and denazification.
You see, there was virtually no difference between that and what Russia's saying right now, and what Yuri Yushikov was reiterating from the phone call that happened just a couple of hours ago. So Russia is still in that same spot, and they have the military capacity to drive that home. Last month, Putin said something else that is very, very important to understand here, that don't read too much into his willingness to have discussions and negotiations and talk in diplomatic ways. That's what he wants, but he also has another side to that coin.
Благодаря усилиям, западных союзников Украины, они выбросили эти договоренности в помойку, как я говорил, и решили воевать с нами до последнего украинца и до полной стратегической победы. Этого не получается, и поэтому мы вместо мирных договоренностей на этот счет вынуждены с помощью вооруженных сил добиваться решения этой задачи, а именно демилитаризации. Мы не допустим, чтобы на Украине были вооруженные силы, которые угрожают в перспективе Российской Федерации и ее народу. Вот эти удары и видели ваши журналисты. И, безусловно, если мы не договоримся мирным путем, мы будем добиваться поставленных целей военных.
So there's no difference. There's no change there. They will get it either the peaceful way, i.e. negotiated settlement where the sides agree to it and then it's implemented on the ground, or there's going to be the military way where they're going to seize by force of arms everything that they want. And it bears repeating here. I've mentioned this. I've been talking about this since Trump came into office. The Western side, the Ukraine side, the United States, all that writ large has an opportunity to say, let's have an ugly negotiated settlement on terms that we don't like, but are at least tolerable today, right now. That includes all of the administrative borders of those 4 oblasts. And that means that Ukraine would have to withdraw some areas it has. Now, that was the June 14 terms. Since that time, Ukraine attacked into Russia and spent about 8 months there, 7 or 8 months inside the Kursk area. They were driven back, and in the process of being driven back, now Russia has gone into the Sumy Oblast. And there's, by many reports, quite a large contingent of troops that Russia has up in the north that they could continue that onslaught to go down even into the Sumy city if necessary. There's still Russian troops in the Kharkiv area. There's now Russian troops in the Dnipro province, in addition to Donetsk and Luhansk and the fourth one down there. Can't recall right offhand. All of these provinces right now are at play. There are Russian soldiers there. No one has been talked about it on the Russian side about withdrawing from any of those. So the terms were those 4. Now, all of a sudden, there's 3 additional oblasts in play. And what Russia will do with those is anybody's guess. But this is what I've been warning about from the beginning of this war, is the longer you delay having what you would consider an ugly negotiated deal, and it would be, I'll say, intolerable, but it better be tolerated. The negotiated deal that they're offering, because you saw that look in Putin's face, and don't misread that. That's not just theater. That is the look of conviction. He will either get what he wants on the negotiating table, or he will take it on the battlefield. That's just the truth of it. And they have the resources to do it. They definitely have the political will. They have the support of their population to acceptable degrees. They have the industrial capacity. I mean, even if it takes another year or two, you've seen, we've had many of the Russian folks on from the Russian side say unequivocally, yeah, we would like it to be over sooner. But if it continues on for a year or two, we'll keep doing that, because they view this as an existential issue. They do not want to, they don't trust us, so they don't really believe a lot about, another Minsk agreement, but they'll only trust what they can protect by themselves. And that's why they say that they'll accept a negotiated settlement on their terms, because their terms are going to ensure that they have physical control of their western flank, and that there is a demilitarization that is not big enough that they can't change their mind later, or they can't get an alliance with any of the Western European leaders and come back and again threaten the Russian, either the Russian Federation itself or the Russian-speaking people that will still be living at various places inside the Ukraine state. So that's what's on the table here. And what does that mean for President Trump? It means if he thinks he's going to get a victory out of this and come out looking good, he might want to reconsider, because he's already made a lot of promises that he can't back up. Like, I'm going to have this resolved in a day. I'm going to have it resolved before I get into office. I'm going to have it resolved in 100 days. I'm days away from walking, and then none of those things ever happened. So already he's kind of wearing thin to his own population, to his own supporters, that you keep making all these claims and yet none of them keep coming to pass. Well, now then he has said, probably not because of any desire to do so, that we're going to cut off a lot of the key weapons systems and ammunition categories to Ukraine, not because that's part of any coherent strategy, but just because we don't have it. We don't have enough. Our industrial capacity is not enough to replace all that's continuing to have been sent to Ukraine, some into the Middle East, to Israel, et cetera, especially some of these interceptor missiles. That's like gold right now. We just don't have them. That's the reason we shut down the Red Sea operation. We just didn't have it to continuation on something that couldn't succeed. And this can't succeed either. And Russia has shown that they're despite the at least still the limited capacity for interceptors in Ukraine, Russia is increasing the frequency and the volume of its air attacks. So even you'll never catch up. You'll always be just a little bit further behind. And it's why continue to waste your ammunition? Why continue to take these precious pieces of gold and continue to throw them into an empty pit that won't change the outcome anyway? You might lose slower, but you're still going to lose. And that's what Trump is going to have to come to grips with here pretty quick, that he may come to the point to where he's like, all right, there's no more pretending here. We're not going to go backwards. We're not going to like suddenly give a bunch of stuff like General Jack Keene's always trying to press Trump into doing. We just don't have it. And even if we did have it, we shouldn't use it, because Ukraine doesn't have the manpower to use it. We saw Julian Rupka earlier this week talking very bluntly, there aren't enough Ukrainian men now, and that density continues to erode and to get less as the days go by. So everything that a rational person can think, all the physical evidence, forget the spin that you get from a lot of these European leaders, but the actual realities on the ground, the actual realities in our inventories, and the numbers of assets that are there, and the dwindling number of those assets as well. And you see the increasing number of the same categories of assets on the Russian side. Any rational thinking person would recognize that despite however much you may want something to happen, however hard Zelensky may press, it doesn't change these realities. It's a zero-sum issue on the manpower in Ukraine. Every day you lose these soldiers, hundreds or thousands in some cases. They're irreplaceable. You just continue to whittle away at the resource base there. You can't those folks. You can't rebuild that in any kind of a short time period. So it's time now to really recognize this. And I hope we're getting to the end state to where that Trump does almost the only thing he can do to single-handedly bring this thing to a conclusion. That is say, we're not just stopping with the, those categories of weapons. We're ending all our support here. And it's time to take all of our guys home. We're ending our intelligence support. We're ending our training, et cetera, because we're no longer going to be putting these assets and these resources into a known failure. Because in my view, and this is something the president can make with ease, it is an immoral immoral position to take that we're going to keep doing those things when we know all it's going to do is mean more Ukrainian deaths. It's time to say, look, we're going to stop all of that. And I think behind the scenes, he can also put a lot of pressure on key European allies to get them to do the same thing. I don't think he should just do it in a vacuum. I think he should do it with a coordinated way to tell all these guys in Europe, hey, I get it. You tried. We did our best. It didn't work. Now it's time to acknowledge reality, get this thing off the table, and let's get back to peace so that we can all improve our economies and we don't have to, self-inflicted wounds with all of this, having to have higher priced gas everywhere else, et cetera. Let's get all that stuff turned back on and get back to the process of just living in some kind of peace and harmony. Maybe that's a strong term. Now it is. There's a lot of bad blood and a lot of hatred that's gone on because of so many things here in the parties, but at least stability. We can at least get into a stable place of where it's the threat of war is going to be off the table or greatly diminished. At least in time, we can get it completely off the table. And then we can get back to at least a possibility of harmonious relations in the future if people are willing to have any kind of sanity and rational thought and common sense. We'll see how that plays out. But that's the situation that we know so far from what's been read out. Again, if we got any kind of a readout from the U.S., if there's any difference between those, we'll certainly bring that to you tomorrow. But all in all, I consider this a positive thing because the Russian side remains cordial. They remain professional. They keep the doors of communication open, and so is the Trump administration. They're doing the same thing, and both leaders deserve credit, which we heartily give, because anything that moves the situation of war in any direction that looks like towards peace or this end of war is a positive thing, which is to be encouraged. Thank you very much, folks, on this special edition, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.